The sudden sharp tone of a flight attendant's voice sliced through the low hum of passengers settling into their seats. "Excuse me, girls, but you'll have to leave these seats. First class is reserved for other passengers." The words felt misplaced, almost surreal, given the quiet luxury of the space. The twins, no older than 12, looked up from their window seats. Their faces a mixture of confusion and disbelief. It wasn't that they didn't belong here, they did. The plush leather seats, the serene ambience, the delicate aroma of gourmet meals and freshly pressed linen. This was all a world they had come to know, thanks to their father. The flight attendant, her voice stern and unwavering, added, "I'm afraid this is a mistake." Her gaze flickered for a second, almost apologetic, but quickly hardened. Mia and Layla exchanged glances, the only visible evidence of their rising anxiety. What was happening? Who were they expected to move for? The stewardess was always polite in first class. Something felt wrong. And then, a voice, deep and smooth, cut through the tension. "Is there a problem here?" The cabin fell silent. All eyes turned toward the man standing at the entrance to first class. It was him, their father. And in that one moment, the passengers recognized who he was. But it wasn't just familiarity that silenced the room. It was the air of authority that surrounded him. The tension in the flight attendant's posture, the rigidity of her uniform, the shifting of her eyes. It was all too clear that this wasn't an ordinary seating mix-up. The father's voice remained calm, but there was a weight to it, a chill in the air as he spoke again. "Why are my daughters being asked to leave?" The flight attendant didn't answer right away. Instead, she hesitated, her eyes darting between the girls and the man. What was at stake here? Why was she so quick to challenge these children's right to sit in first class? And why was she looking at their father like that? Meet the father, a man whose life had been defined by the work he put into reaching this point. His name was Damian Cole, a celebrated entrepreneur, a former Olympic gold medalist, and now one of the wealthiest men in the world. But it wasn't just his wealth that commanded respect. It was the quiet strength he exuded. A man who had spent his entire life ensuring his family had the best. For him, this moment, this sudden challenge, was about far more than the inconvenience of a seat on an airplane. It was about respect, the dignity of his children, the legacy he had built. He had endured immense struggles to reach this point, to give his daughters the opportunities he had never had. And now, some stranger was questioning their place here? It was unacceptable. Damian had always been a man of patience, but even the most patient man has his breaking point. The flight attendant didn't move. Her eyes narrowed, as though daring him to challenge her authority further. And for a moment, the entire cabin felt suspended in time. There was something unspoken in the air, something simmering just beneath the surface of first-class politeness. Mia, with the gentleness of a child who had known little but kindness, spoke first. "We've been assigned these seats," she said, her voice barely above a whisper but firm. Layla, always more assertive, added quickly, "Please let us stay. We didn't do anything wrong." The flight attendant finally broke her silence. "I'm sorry, but your seats were a mistake. We need to move you." But before she could finish, Damian's voice, low and commanding, cut through the air once again. "Perhaps you should check with the pilot." His words were cold. The tension between the flight attendant and Damian escalated quickly. He demanded to know the reason behind this absurd request. The flight attendant's refusal to budge started to feel less like an error and more like something deeper, more uncomfortable. The father's calm demeanor began to crack. The twins looked up at him, uncertain but trusting him completely. They knew he had their back, but they didn't understand why this was happening. Why them? As the flight attendant's supervisor was called, a ripple of unease moved through the cabin. Whispers spread. The girls, innocent, composed, undeserving of this treatment, caught the attention of the other passengers. Something was clearly not right. But what? And how far was the pilot involved? Damian watched the flight attendant closely, his mind already processing everything. He had lived a lifetime of people doubting him, doubting his worth. He had always risen above it. But this was his family, and he would not let anyone diminish them. Not here. Not now. A few moments later, Captain Harris entered the cabin. His face was tight, almost apologetic. The flight attendant looked relieved to see him. Damien's gaze sharpened. He took in the situation quickly, realizing that there was more to the flight attendant's attitude than a simple mistake. "Mr. Cole," Captain Harris said with forced politeness, "we have a policy about first-class seating that—" Before he could finish, Damien interrupted. "You're the one who suggested this, weren't you? You influenced her to ask my daughters to move." His voice was no longer just calm. It was icy. Harris stiffened. "I wasn't. I didn't." Damien stepped forward. "You didn't think I'd find out? That my daughters would ever be treated this way? On a flight I paid for?" He glanced at the flight attendant. "You made a mistake." It was clear now. The system, the bias, the discrimination. It was all here, in the open. The implications were larger than a mere seating error. They were about power, privilege, the ugly side of society's assumptions. As the confrontation intensified, the flight attendant, trembling, shot a glance at the pilot. "It wasn't my fault," she said, almost pleading. "You told me to move them." Captain Harris faltered. His face went pale. The truth was now laid bare. Damien took a long breath. The situation had spiraled out of control. The consequences were inevitable. The airline had to act. The flight attendant's career, the captain's job, everything was on the line now. But the girls? They were innocent in all of this, swept up in something far bigger than them. They didn't deserve to be pawns in this cruel game. Damien's eyes never left the flight attendant or the pilot, but his voice softened, just a fraction. "I'll handle this," he said. "But know this, every action has consequences. You disrespected my family, and that is something I won't stand for." He turned to the girls. "Mia, Layla, stay right here." Then, in front of everyone, with quiet strength, he delivered his final command to the flight attendants and the pilot. "You'll apologize to my daughters, and I expect it to be sincere." And in the thick silence that followed, the passengers watched as the apology was made, not just to the twins, but to the Cole family as a whole. Later, after the flight touched down, the media caught wind of the incident. The airline issued a public apology, but the consequences were severe. The flight attendant was placed on leave. The captain was suspended, pending further investigation. For Damien, though, it was about something much more important than headlines. As he and his daughters stepped off the plane, he saw their faces, more confident now, their heads held higher. He smiled. They may have faced adversity, but they emerged stronger because of it. Together, they were unstoppable. And that's what really mattered.